You know, we're all a little obsessed with the idea of the lone genius, right? But what if that whole ideal is, well, broken? In this explainer, we're going to dig into a pretty provocative idea, why it might actually be better to be average than to be a broken genius.
I mean, think about it. We put geniuses up on this pedestal. The scientists, the artists, the innovators. We celebrate their big breakthroughs and their incredible brilliance. But have we ever really stopped to ask if we're seeing the whole picture? Or if that brilliance comes with a hidden and sometimes a really devastating cost?
So let's start with where we see this idea most often, which is, of course, in pop culture. We've all seen that character, right? The brilliant but kind of socially awkward genius.
I mean, just think of someone like Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory. He's the perfect example of this whole thing. Absolutely amazing with equations, a total whiz, but completely oblivious to how his friends are feeling. We laugh at it, but that character actually represents a really powerful and maybe even damaging cultural idea. And this kind of points to this bigger trade-off we've all just sort of accepted, that you can have this extraordinary achievement in one area of your life, but it often means you're totally out of touch or maybe even destructive in others. So the real question is that a price that's actually worth paying?
And this isn't just some made-up story for TV. When we look at real-life geniuses, you start to see this pattern, a pattern of brilliance that comes with a very real and often a really tragic personal cost.
Let's take Albert Einstein. We celebrate him as one of the greatest minds in history, for sure. But his personal life? It shows a really sharp contrast. His early letters to his first wife, Mileva Maric, who was a brilliant physicist herself, by the way, they were tender, they were passionate. But as his career took off, that brilliance just didn't translate to his marriage. Their relationship became turbulent and ended in a painful divorce, leaving Mileva feeling totally isolated.
Or what about the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche? I mean, his mind went into the deepest, darkest questions about human existence. And for him, well, that abyss gazed right back. He lived this profoundly lonely life and was just plagued by mental anguish.
And then you have Vincent van Gogh. Today, his paintings are completely priceless masterpieces. But in his entire lifetime, he sold just one, a single painting. It's unbelievable. His immense, world-changing talent existed right alongside this severe depression and a total lack of recognition that, in the end, just consumed him.
Now, this isn't just a story about scientists and artists from 100 years ago. This pattern of suffering under the weight of your own talent, it extends to modern peak performers too, in music and even in sports.
We've all heard of the tragic 27 Club. It's just a horrifying list of brilliant musicians like Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain, all of whom died at the shockingly young age of 27, usually from suicide or substance abuse. They burned so bright, but it seems like their immense talent was just inseparable from this immense personal pain.
And hey, it even happens to our physical geniuses. Elite athletes like the swimmer Michael Phelps, they're so laser-focused on their training, on that single goal of winning. But what happens after the crowds go home and the cheering stops? They can experience something called Olympic blues. It's like a kind of withdrawal once that massive adrenaline rush is gone. That peak performance can leave a huge void that's incredibly difficult to fill.
So all of this really leads us to a fundamental question. We've seen the cost, not just to the person themselves, but to their loved ones. Is that one singular, brilliant achievement really worth destroying other parts of yourself, and maybe even the people around you?
Okay, so what's the alternative here? After seeing all the wreckage left behind by this kind of peak performance, from Einstein to Michael Phelps, the article we're looking at proposes a really radical idea, the wisdom of being average. Now hold on, this isn't about aiming for mediocrity, not at all. It's about completely redefining what success even is, shifting from that narrow, intense focus on one skill to a broader, more balanced, and honestly, more sustainable way of living.
What if we've been defining success all wrong? You know, we're taught to admire the shooting star, the person who burns the brightest. But this idea suggests maybe we should be admiring the deep-rooted tree instead. The goal isn't to be a genius in one thing while you're total disaster in everything else. It's about being a whole, balanced individual, someone who's grounded, humble, and sensitive. It's about a totally different kind of triumph, one that's achieved through conscious effort and awareness, not just raw, untamed talent.
So, to give this idea some real shape, the source material turns to the Bhagavad Gita, which is an ancient and really influential Hindu scripture, and it describes a wise person not as the most intelligent or the most talented, but as someone who achieves this state of profound balance. They see the inaction in action. What that means is they understand the deeper currents of cause and effect. This lets them act decisively, but without being chained to their ego or a desperate need for a specific outcome. It's all about action without that frantic attachment.
And this completely flips our definition of genius on its head. It's no longer about how much intellectual horsepower you have. In this view, the true genius is the person who has the wisdom and the moral clarity to figure out what ought to be done and what shouldn't. It's about judgment, character, and awareness, and those are qualities anyone can work on.
So here it is, the final choice, laid out plain and simple. On one side, you've got the broken genius, a life of extraordinary but really isolated achievement that often causes a lot of pain. And on the other side, you have the wise person, a balanced, grounded, and aware individual. The core argument here is that it's just far, far better to be this kind of average person, whole and healthy, than a genius who ends up destroying others and ultimately themselves.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We're so often told to go out and change the world. But what if the greatest achievement isn't changing the world at all? What if it's mastering ourselves? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for exploring this with me today.